And back home we were getting our communion photographs and confirmation photographs, and then you had all people just bring their kids when they're 1 or 2 for family portraits and that. Saw a lot of her photographs obviously over the years, but she was the mainstay. Like I think her and Joe McGrath, Joe was down on the manor originally. They were the main 2 photographers I can remember.
Well, I would think going back to the 30s, 40s and 50s, having your photograph taken was a huge event in people's lives. It wasn't something that was done on a regular basis. Very few people had film cameras, possessed cameras, so the actual trip to a photographer was a huge day. It may have been a communion or a wedding or a confirmation or whatever, but there was always a purpose behind having a photograph taken.
I mean, considering that she opened her photography studio in 1922 at quite a young age, she, was incredibly determined, from that alone to start a business at a young age. And she had apprenticed with Hughes Photographers on Manor Street, but quite quickly set up in her own right, and started her business and got going. And in the earlier parts of the collection that we hold, you can see her taking photographs outside, and then moving inside, taking portraits there. And she had all of the equipment that she needed. She had her backdrops. And over the years, because she worked from 1922 right up until 1979, she developed her skills and her expertise over those years. In some of the photographs, you'll see that people are holding this sort of scrolled up paper in their hands, partly to give them something to do with their hands, but actually what they're holding is photographic professional photographer's journal that she obviously had in the studio. So she was very much involved in improving her skills, in keeping up to date with the latest photographic ideas and technology, but also with the artistry of what she was doing, because she was taking photographs obviously in the 1920s that were in black and white, but she also hand tinted them. So she provided colour photographs for her customers, and so the skill required for that was phenomenal. And amongst the collection, occasionally there'll be little snippets and little hints of the work that went into that. So sometimes on the envelope of the negative that we might have in some cases, there'll be a note that the hair is light brown or the eyes are green. And in one of them, we actually found a little lock of hair for the child. So that she could actually, when she was doing her hand tinting work, that she could be absolutely correct and accurate in how she represented it. And in that case, we were able to return the hair to its original owner, who obviously was now an adult.
She was a perfectionist, but she did lovely photos. Yeah.
And my confirmation photo and my brother's communion photo was done by Annie Brophy, and we have that. And my parents' wedding photograph, just the 2 of them.
And she would have retouched the actual negative. So where the film didn't show detail in, say, someone's hair, she would have had the skill to actually pencil in on the negative.
Unless you were very wealthy, you didn't wear a white dress or anything. And my mother had this kind of dress with coloured flowers on it. And, I used to say, oh, that was lovely, and a different colour. And she said, but the dress wasn't actually that colour. She said that Annie Brophy used to hand paint in some of the colour.
From her beginnings with glass plate negatives in the 1920s, then into the black and white negatives, right up until, with colour photographs in the 1970s, you can see the development of photographic technology. But more importantly, I think for Waterford, is you can see the changes that happened in Waterford. So you can see people and their lives. She not only photographed people who came in for a professional portrait, but occasionally she would photograph externally. So she photographed events like the train derailment in Tramore, and also she photographed just people. Sometimes, not just people who came in for the portrait, but occasionally people she found artistically interesting. So some of the characters in Waterford are photographed. Because she was involved herself with, there was a sort of a theatre company, an opera theatre company. There's a lot of Waterford people dressed up in theatrical costumes, which is wonderful. But I think what's really brilliant, as I say, is because you're getting this glimpse of people from the 1920s right up to the 1970s, you can trace the fashions and the changes, and even just in terms of the poses, because as I said, in the early years, when she herself was starting out, and also when people were less comfortable with being photographed, you can see that people are sitting and they're a little bit uncomfortable, or standing behind somebody and not quite sure what to do with their hands. And then as time goes on, you can see that people are getting more comfortable with the idea of being photographed, and also anyone who has memories of being photographed by Miss Brophy will say that she was very very detailed and very determined that people posed as she set them. But you just, even in terms of people's facial expressions, you can see that change that happened over time as people became more comfortable with being photographed.